that would mean a retrofit of, say, $30,000, $100,000, 200, 300. You see what I mean? I mean, it could be a very high cost, or it could be a relatively minimal one. I don't know that yet. So we need to go into a decision like this, obviously, when we're going to move a lot of people and affect a lot of the ways we do things, with the rock-solid knowledge about, how much it's going to cost and how much we're going to save. This would include things like ADA compliance issues, HVAC items, bathrooms, telephone, wireless, especially, at Davisville as well. If you're going to retrofit that building to become offices, a lot of those kinds of things would apply there as well. What I hope to do in January, at our first school committee meeting, I think timing is everything right now, because we would probably need the entire spring and summer to make all of these changes, is to come to you with details about a full day K options and cost. We could do it in one of a couple of ways, and here's how much it would cost if we did it these ways. Details about the Alternative Learning Center. What would be its functionality and the specifics about that? What would it require in terms of staffing? What would it require in terms of cost? The detail about the long-term savings and other benefits for special education programming. What do we currently send out of district that would be coming in? What are the cost savings that would occur, putting that together with the cost of our own staffing and that sort of thing? And then what kinds of information about projections and expenditures for the timeline associated with the conversion of the buildings. In retrofitting Davisville, if we needed to do that, and retrofitting the central office, if we needed to do that, if there are any adjustments to the D building, if we needed to do something like that. And I will come to you with a very specific proposal at that time and how to proceed. So I'm going to open it up for questions right now, if you should have some.
Mrs. Avanzado, and then Mr. Buskirden.
Just a couple quick things. Kim had said at our next meeting, but then I'm seeing here we're not talking about this until January, and that to me seems much, you probably just misspoke on that. I think we need a lot more time to get information and to consider this and to, so
let me
I see
clarify.
in the materials it says January. So
I can clarify that. My first intention was to have you vote tonight and, for just about no more than $18,000 to get the architectural work done, and then I could come back to you in January. I think I would like you to think about this for 2 weeks and come back to me, or I guess it's 3 weeks now before our next meeting, and we'll continue the discussion, take a vote that night. And that way, over the next few weeks, if people come to you and have questions, or if you want to come to me and have questions, that would be fine.
I would just briefly say, this is the first exposure to this plan. I would note that some of this is stuff we've been talking about a long, long time, and could be, very beneficial in a number of different ways, both programmatically and financially, particularly the Alternative Learning Center, which I definitely want to hear more about, and what kind of programs, what special education programs we're thinking about putting there that we're currently outsourcing, those kinds of things. I definitely have some concerns also as well on the full day K side of things, but just I'll leave it there for now.
Okay.
And hold my questions and comments for someone else.
Mr. Buskirden, and then Mr. Streetsy.
Thank you, Chairman. Hey, Doctor, is any of your options, and I think you may have said it here towards the end, that Davisville becomes the Alternative Learning Center, and we can then use our full-time buses to bring the kids over here for the high school portion? Is that an option? If retrofitting something is,
that may be an option to use Davisville as something in that regard. But what my thinking in terms of that, and talking about this with Dr. Pizzullo, would be feeling like we would really be limiting the number of opportunities to have students, particularly high school students, being able to interact with the high school. That would require a bus ride all the way across town whenever that needed to happen. Whereas right now, some of those students, for instance, in the PASS program, can come, take a class right on the high school schedule and walk back, right away and get right back to work, and it doesn't require that much of a break in their day. That's why I feel a little bit better about having a program like that on this campus where there are other kids, where there are buses already coming. But, you know, that would be an option that we could explore, too, the possibility of using Davisville again for students, even if it's an alternative learning center.
My other question was, is there a reason why the figure was not to exceed, or I think the words were, you weren't
Yeah.
up to, no greater than 18,000?
Right,
Why
you know.
isn't there a finer point on that?
Well, originally, you know, my thinking on this at this point is that we were thinking in terms of about $12,000, which is, you know, the town architect we had talked to and said that that would roughly be the cost. But we were also thinking in terms of returning Davisville to, you know, like your idea, and using that for a school. And that would be an option. That would be another option that we hadn't even considered with the architect. So that would incur some additional costs. It would be basically 3 drawings instead of 2. It may be that there's very little to do to Davisville to return it to a place where kids could go because it's already made that way. But there may be certain costs, certain, you know, startup costs to get the building back to a place where we feel comfortable with it, having kids back in there again. It's been a couple of years since we've used those rooms and bathrooms and all of that. So, and because it wouldn't be your standard elementary school anymore, it will be a school for older kids, conceivably. Now you probably have to make some retrofits to their bathrooms and that sort of thing, where the fixtures are very different in those different kinds of schools. So those kinds of things, you know, looking at all the options that we have and just getting a rough estimate from an architect about, you know, what would it mean to do the retrofits.
I like, you know, I like the fact that we're trying to figure out a way to keep our kids in-house as opposed to sending them elsewhere to get their education, especially since we're responsible for them through their age 21. That can get quite expensive. I like that idea. Personally, I would like to see a little bit sharper point on the architectural cost, and maybe instead of going, maybe just breaking it down and doing it more step by step. You know, your ideal, for example, the ideal situation, have them assess that, and then if we find that's cost prohibitive, then okay, what's Plan B? And maybe we won't have to necessarily spend all $18,000 to get the answers we're looking for, good or bad.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying, but part of the need to spend a little bit of money to figure this out, even if there's like a couple of different levels of information that you can get, would be to kind of get enough information about each scenario so you know which is the optimal situation. You know, if all are roughly the same, then it might be easy for us to figure out which is the best. But if these are radically different, like if we're even going to touch the central office and make it into a building with kids and it costs, you know, this excessive amount of money, and we haven't explored that, we don't know if that's the optimal or if now that takes it completely out of the running, where we thought we were only going to spend this much money. So,
Mr. Cerisi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Dr. Roger. Just a couple of real quick comments on the points of education and obviously budgetary. First, on the educational perspective, and I've talked about this a lot in the 6 years that I've been on the school committee. As an advocate for special education students and as an advocate for my own son who's a special education student in the district, myself, like most parents of children that have disabilities, advocate for a least restrictive environment for their children's education. To me, that least restrictive environment has always been providing services for children, for students in district when possible. And like you said, and I certainly agree, and I know a lot of other parents do as well, there'll always be that category of a group of students who were unable to provide services for in the district, and their needs are better met outside of the district, where there's a more concentrated area of expertise for those specific needs that those students have. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, the more we can provide services for students in district, the better, because I truly do believe that's what's best in the students' best interest. Having them be a part of the school district, having them be a part of this community, not living in this community and receiving services in East Providence or Providence.
Right.
'Cause that's not being part of the school district or being part of the community. So wherever we could do that, great. I'm all for it. Understanding that there are specific cases where we're unable to do that. So, and I just kind of, I always say it's kind of a slippery slope. We don't want to get, and I know you agree with me on this, we've discussed this before, we don't want to be looking at this solely from a dollar signs perspective, where
Right.
we're doing a disservice to the students by taking them out of placements purely for budgetary reasons, when really we can't meet or provide that level of expertise or services that they need in district. And I know how much parents really would like to have services provided in districts if it can meet the needs of their individual child. On a personal level, for me, fortunately, we've always been able to stay in district, which is what I've advocated for. Lastly, on the full-day K, I know that's something that we've been discussing since we've gotten on the school committee 6 years now, and I know it was discussed far before we came on the school committee as well. And I think it's something that we all see the importance of and the benefit of. It's always the other piece of it is obviously paying for it.
Right.
But if we can look to where we can garner savings in other areas and do that at a cost neutral or even a small cost, obviously I think there's a huge benefit there for the students and for the community. Particularly, as I had asked you earlier today, 36 school districts in the state, how many school districts have full-day K? And I think it was 18.
Yes.
So it's 18 has it, 18 don't have it. And if we want to consider...
18 have it universally.
Right.
There's probably about 26 or 27, like with North Kingstown included, that some of their schools have it and
Right.
some don't.
So I think if we want to, again, consider ourselves, one of the elite school districts in the state, I think we need to be in that category of school districts that do provide it. But what it all comes down to is prioritizing, because we've always said, well, we can't afford it, we can't afford it. And I've always said, I really don't think that's the case. I think the case is where are our priorities? And just to kind of, do we want to put, and I know this isn't an option, but do we want to put turf on the football field, or do we want to have full-day K? And these are the things that we discuss, or we
Right.
need to discuss in our strategic plan. Where are our priorities as a community, as a school committee? We have limited funds and resources, obviously, and that pot just keeps shrinking. So we have to become more and more fine-tuned on where we're going to allocate our resources.
Mhm.
So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Mr. Welch.
First of all, Mr. Cerisi said just about everything I would want to say.
That's because I was looking at your notes when I was talking, so.
I really agree with keeping our youngsters in district as long as we can provide them the necessary services. I stand right behind Mr. Cerisi on that. As it relates to our priorities, 16.2 says the school committee is charged with providing an educational program that meets the needs of the community. And that's something that the school committee, with your administration, has to make a decision on. And I agree with Larry again on that issue. It's something that I believe the school committee needs to come to grips with, and making sure that we are in tune with the needs of the community to provide education first for all of our students equally. I just made a quick note. I was talking to Rich Booth earlier this week, and I guess we're going to be starting wireless installation shortly. That'd be one thing that we're probably not in the program for over there at Davisville L, because it's not a school at the
Right.
present time. I don't know. It's just, I just thought that was one thing that might slip by the wayside.
There are a million little pieces like that that you need to consider. For instance, one of the other ones is that we currently, the full-day K that we do have is paid for with Title I, or at least partially. We would not be able to use Title I to pay for those teachers at Quidnesset anymore. So that would be something we would have to budget for. We'd still get the same money for Title I, but Title I has rules about supplanting. If everyone in the district has it, you can't use Title I money for it at one school. You have to use that money for things above and beyond what the other kids get for Title I. So that would take, that's another example of things, you got to be thinking about every piece of it. So you need some time to put something like this together to consider all of those different options.
Two other real quick things. I don't know if it would be beneficial to have maybe two members of the school committee. I can say this because I'm not going to be on school committee. Be part of a committee to work with administration to try and get this thing together so there's some good communication with the school committee. I just make that as an open-ended statement. The other thing I am concerned about, because it's happened elsewhere, not in this school committee, not in this school administration, is that we need to make sure that we meet the requirements of RFP and bidding. And that's a concern of mine because it isn't working elsewhere in this town. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, does anybody else have anything else they wanted to say? All right. Well, I'm intrigued by the idea, Dr. Auger, especially the full-day kindergarten idea. I will say my bias is that I came from a district where I didn't go to kindergarten because we didn't have any kindergarten. So for a long time, I looked at kindergarten, full-day kindergarten, as being something that it was nice to have, but wasn't necessary because it was more to help out working parents. But recently, Dr. Humbert and I were at a meeting in which they talked about a long-term study in Ypsilanti, Michigan, and I believe the study's been going on for, was it 25 years? 25 years they've been looking at education in this community. I think it's the longest long-term study of education in anywhere in the United States. And as part of that, what they have found is that the areas where they have put money into early preschool education have less crime, have better wages. It was the sort of thing of there was tremendous benefits that you got by the preschool education. And so it was a little bit more of, oh, okay, this just isn't talk. This is really a study that shows where the benefits are. And so I think that got me, when you brought this up about full-day kindergarten, I was more receptive than I would have been a year ago because it was that realization of the benefits that this does for not only our community but for everyone long-term that you don't really think about, that it's not just the babysitting for kids for all day.
Right.
So I will be interested in finding out where we go. I know there was a question among, I heard it from at least one committee member about the architect. Do we have a town-wide bid on architect? How does that work?
Mary, you want to talk about that?
Yes, what we have been doing is we've been working with Phil Bergeron of the town, and they do have someone that they use. And he's been very helpful to us with the Davisville Middle School roof and any of the other projects that we have on the bond. So that's who we've been going to for our guidance, and he's actually come to us for a couple of side issues that technically the town, that are not under the bond as well.
All right. Any other questions? Mr. Busgarden and then Mrs. Avanzato.
A follow-up question to that, Ms. King. Is there any this arrangement with the town architect, for lack of a better term, is this a formal agreement, or is this something that we could, even though he is the one that you've been using, can we also take that out to an RFP?
Oh, we certainly can. We could do that if we chose. I mean, we always have that option to do that.
Okay.
Excuse me, Kim. Can I ask
Yes.
a question? Are you talking about Jim Partridge?
Yes.
Can I explain something?
Yes.
Facilities Committee, when we were going through the Davisville roof project and so forth, we went through, I forgot, maybe 8 or 10 architects. Under the state bidding program, we have to qualify the architect on their experience, et cetera, not on their cost. That's a requirement. It's kind of a crazy thing, but it's so you're not looking at the dollar value. You're looking at their ability to provide the service. We did an extensive survey. The architect that we've been using, the town has used many times in the past. We've had excellent relationships with this architect. They came in hands down, the winner, if you will, and with the Facilities Committee. And we discussed this about something else, the recent Facilities Committee meeting, about do we really need to go back out and reinvent the wheel so soon, okay? And the feeling was that we didn't. So I would say everybody seems to be very comfortable with Jim Partridge. I forget the name of the company.
It's Edward Rouse Architects, ERA is what they go by. And what I can tell you is that Mr. Partridge has a very, very good mix of the architectural piece that we need, but also the program management piece that's very important. That in another position that I was in, we actually had separate people for those two positions. We had someone who was the project manager, who oversaw all the projects, and then we had the architectural side of it as well. But I think that Jim has a very good mix of both of those. I worked with Jim and Phil Bergeron over the summer with the Davisville Middle School roof, and Jim is really very good.
Mrs. Avanzato?
Yes, I've heard very good things, and I have a lot of faith in the Facilities Subcommittee, as well as in you, Mary, and Mr. Welch's recommendations. I am just wanting to make sure that under the state and town bidding laws that we are complying, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Mary Ann, whether or not services like architecture, specialized service, can be a sole bid. Am I right on that, or? I just want to make sure that we're in compliance.
Architects, legal services should all put a bid.
I thought I recalled that, but I wasn't positive.
Right, anything else? Sorry, I was talking to Mr. Cerisi. Right now, as part of, thank you, Dr. Ajay.
You're very welcome.
Part of this heading is presentations and recognitions. And so, since it is recognition, sometimes we bring up students who we've seen who have done something, and so you don't, okay. So that's what I was asking Mr. Cerisi, is that if he had a recognition for now, but he's just said no. So, does anybody else have any students who they wanted to recognize? Okay. All right. Dr. Ajay, do you have anything else for Superintendent's report?
I think I'm all set. Thank you.
All right, so that takes us into routine items. We have I need a motion to seal the executive session minutes of October 23rd, 2012.
So moved.
Do I have a second? I'll second that. All right, all those in favor of sealing the executive session minutes of October 23rd, 2012, please say aye.
Aye.
Abstain, since I wasn't present?
Abstain, not present.
It was today.
Oh, tonight. Oh, I'm sorry. I was talking about the minutes that she showed us at the executive meeting. I'm sorry.
So just Mrs. Avanzato abstained.
Right.
Everybody else, any nays? Okay. Motion passes. And Lorraine, we don't have a disclosure of any executive session votes?
It was
or-
just the one vote to adjourn. All members were present at tonight's executive session except Linda Avanzato, Mel Boyd Benson, and Bill Mudge. Motion was made by Dick Welch to adjourn executive session and go into open. Motion passed 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so that brings us to the consent agenda. Are there items that need to be exempted from the consent agenda? Mr. Cerisi and Mr. Welch.
Madam Chair, I don't have any exemptions, but before we do vote to accept the consent agenda, there are two individuals that I did want to recognize, but I'm going to wait until before we take that vote. So.
Okay. Mr. Welch.
Yes, I should have taken time to get these minor questions answered. I apologize, but on the consent agenda, D1, E2, and I want to make a comment about F4.
Did you also want to exempt the work session minutes of, or the executive session minutes of October 29th?
Did I want to?
Earlier you said something about that you wanted to abstain, so I want to know which of the minutes you wanted to abstain.
Well, I wasn't at the meeting.
So on the 9th, both the minutes of number 1 and number 2.
I'm sorry, you're right. Yes.
Is there anything else to exempt from the consent agenda? Mrs. Avanzato.
Actually, just give me one moment. I need to ask a question.
Okay. Mr. Cerisi.
While Mrs. Avanzato's taking a moment, there was just two individual staff members that I wanted to recognize whose resignations are on our consent agenda for this evening. They both, hopefully, I know, moving on to bigger and better things, and I wish them both well in their future endeavors. One of them is Bethany Pratt. She's an occupational therapy assistant with the district and has been with the district for quite a number of years. She got to know her on a professional and personal level, and just tremendous asset to the district and to the students in the district, and working with the special education population in the district, and really collaborative team member. So I want to wish her well and recognize her, as well as Michael Armstrong, who was a paraprofessional with the school district for a number of years, working with the special education population. Again, another great asset to the district, and both these people are tremendous in working with the students and other staff members and families. So sad to see them go, and just wanted to recognize them for their work in the district, and wish them well.
Thank you. Mrs. Avanzato.
Actually, I was just making sure that none of the issues that were dealt with tonight in executive session were on this consent agenda, because I wasn't present, and Mr. Welch said no, so I'm fine.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve the remainder of the consent agenda items?
So moved.
Second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion passes. All right. We will now go back to items B1 and 2. Can I have a motion to approve B1 and 2?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Mrs. Avanzato, second that? All right. And so all those in favor of approving the minutes under B1 and B2, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those who abstain?
Me.
Thank you. And there were no nay votes. All right, going down to D1. Mr. Welch.
Okay, I was a little confused by all of this information. I apologize for that. I would like to say that I think it's, from my perspective, the languages that we are offering in this district should be looked at and prioritized as to are we teaching what our students really will utilize in our global economy that we now talk about all the time. It's my feeling that there could be a change in that, and I think it needs to be looked at, quite frankly, by this committee. So that's just a comment I have about that, because I really couldn't make heads or tails of the information that was provided. So I apologize for bringing it up now. I should have talked to you beforehand. I didn't have that opportunity, so I would like that to be considered.
Is there a motion to approve D1?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, seeing no further comments, all those in favor of approving D1, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries. E2, Mr. Welch, you exempted this.
Yeah. I read through this, and I understand that the way it's being proposed to be paid by the student activities, not by the school committee or out of our budget. And my questions were, and again, I apologize that I did not have the opportunity to get back to administration and get this answered. But A, I don't know who made the decision to do this, especially with student activities fees. And B, why wouldn't we be doing this out of our budget and not out of student activities fees? I'd like an answer to that, if I could get one.
This was actually brought to my attention by staff at the high school. And the feeling was that because a lot of there are funds that are in the student activity fees that come from these dance recitals and everything that we have, this is something that they wanted to do, and they wanted to do it rather quickly to put down this flooring. And I guess it's a rather unique type flooring that will go down. It will give protection for the dancers, but then can come up afterwards. So it's a minimal of wear and tear at times that they're not dancing. So this was just a recommendation that came forward from Principal Kenworthy's group. He was involved in this. It's something that they wanted to do, and they wanted to pay for it out of their student activity account. This is not something that was budgeted in our fiscal year, but it is something that they wanted to get done this year.
I mean, am I the only one that thinks that, this is our building, we should be doing that if we feel as though it's important? I'm sorry, I don't get it, that's all.
I would comment on that and say that I think that Mrs. King just explained the connection for me. I mean, I was wondering what the connection between activities and this floor is, and that explains it. They're going to be using it for dance only, and if it's taken up then, so that helps me.
And actually, now that I'm looking at this too, I want to say that I do have a mistake compared to the purchase order. It's $8,073. I have $8,703 on the front request. So if you're to approve it tonight, it's $8,073.24.
Just went down by $700.
Yeah, there you go. Wow.
It's a good thing I asked the question.
Mr. Bestgarten.
If this is not out of our budget, why are we approving it?
Because it comes from a student activity fund. The student activity funds are funds that are on our ledger, if you will. And these are funds that this continues to be a question with some of the principals also and some of the staff that have questions saying, well, why do we have to go to bid? Why do we have to do that? Because really, these funds are now, once they come into that student activity account, they're under our purview and they're under our oversight. And we have to make sure that we're good stewards of those funds, that if we're required to do bids, we do bids, that, the work doesn't go to so-and-so's uncle or so-and-so's aunt, that we make sure we've done our due diligence. And that's why it's come here. It still needs school committee approval to make sure that the proper oversight was done on the expenditure of those funds.
Okay, how did the determination for American Harlequin, how was that?
Well, this
chosen?
it's been explained to me that this is sort of a unique flooring. It's called a Cascade flooring. And there were two different vendors that actually have this type of flooring. And the other vendor was a higher bid, as I did include that. The other vendor was significantly higher at about $4,000 higher. So there were only two that we could actually find this unique type flooring from, but we did look, and these were the two that came out, and the American Harlequin was the cheapest in providing it.
Okay. I just get a little mixed up. There are times when RFPs go out and we look at all the bids that were submitted, but this was not one of them.
Well, this wouldn't have been an RFP because it's under if we have anything that's between 2,000, well, actually, this probably should have been an RFP, but the reason, no, actually, I'm sorry, it did not have to be an RFP because it's construction, so it's less than $10,000. But I did include both quotes that we had. So normally what we do is if we don't have to go out to bid, we do try to attach 3 quotes. We show the quotes. This we weren't able to get the third one because it is such a unique flooring. But because this is a construction, it's for the facilities, it's under $10,000, we didn't have to go out to bid on that. What we would do is between over $2,500 and less than $5,000, we get 3 quotes, whether that be via phone, the internet, written quote, or whatnot. Over $5,000, if it's non-construction, then that's when we actually go out to formal bid.
So there's construction involved in this?
Well, yeah, I mean, they're going to be putting down the other flooring and whatever they need to do underneath to make sure that this flooring can go down and also be easily pulled back up.
Well, that was my question. I understand how, if this was a removable flooring, a flexible flooring, why was construction involved? Why is construction involved?
Well, I don't think it's extreme construction, but it's definitely, they do have to do preparation of the floor below it. Because my understanding of it, Mr. Biscardin, I'm sorry, I don't have all the answers to it, but my understanding is that it does need to have some basis at least to be down on the platform.
And where's this going?
It's going to the auditorium.
Here,
Yes,
on the stage here?
yeah.
Okay. I'm confused at what structurally has to be done to put a removable flooring down, but I'm not a flooring guy.
Well,
so
I don't know that it's structural, but I do know that it does have to have some sort of base that it needs to go on, and a base that isn't going to be a bother when it's pulled up, but it's not, my understanding is that it's not just something that gets thrown down on the floor.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Well, I would applaud the music department for thinking ahead and using their funds for something that they've wanted and at the same time knew that we hadn't budgeted for. Mrs. Avanzado.
I would agree with that. One of the points that we made with money that's coming in from shows and concerts is, people were always questioning on the school committee, where's that money going? That's a lot of money. And this is exactly what they should do with some of the money. It's great to see it going back into the program.
Yes, I agree.
And I think the questions were good questions as well. But I would offer a motion at this time to approve that item.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. All right, that brings us to F4. Mr. Welch, you brought this up.
A very long list of stipends. I looked at some of the categories. One of them was something about, I think it was board games, an advisor. I think, if I remember right, Davisville Middle had 2 co-advisors for the newspaper. Like a lot of other things that we're having to look at, sports and activities, et cetera, going forward in your next budget, again, I won't be here. I spoke with some of the other school committees at a recent meeting of the Rhode Island Association of School Committees, and the chair of the Smithfield School Committee mentioned to me that they had looked at all of their stipends for coaches and advisors a while back, and they were, first of all, they were astounded at the dollars, the total dollars. And she told me that they cut their stipends virtually in half. This is something that that I think we get into the habit of doing some things, and we just, because when times were good, it was easy and there was no problem. But times are not good, and we're looking for nickels and dimes and quarters everywhere. I would suggest that this gets some very serious consideration going forward in your next contract, which is coming up the end of this school year. I make a motion to approve approve F4.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. That brings us to the end of the consent agenda and to unfinished business. The A1 is what we have said that we will table for this week and bring up for our next meeting. So that brings us to 3B. And this is reestablishment of the negotiation subcommittee and appointment of members. We as a committee had previously decided that we were going to have a subcommittee, and so this brings up if we would like to establish the negotiations committee not again, but if we would like to, because we are still in negotiations, and I know that Mr. Cerisi and I talked about this, and we said that we would be, I don't want to say happy to serve, but we would be willing to serve. And so then I think it's just a matter of if we need to appoint any administrators, unless somebody else really has a deep desire to be on the negotiation subcommittee.
I do.
Mrs. Avanzado.
I was just going to say that I understand there are numerous members that want to be on that committee, and that's a good thing, I guess. But last go-round, we didn't have anyone on there from the school committee. I like that, actually. I thought that was the whole committee was kept informed, but we weren't in many of the meetings. However, if there are 2 or 3 members on this committee that want to serve, then I certainly wouldn't be against that.
All right. Go ahead, Mr. Buscardin.
If there are to be school committee members on it, I would like to be part of it. However, in the past, I've always wondered why, when we went into negotiations with bargaining units, why, when they have professional negotiators, why don't we have a similar situation where we can have a professional negotiator on our behalf? Because it's kind of, expecting us to be able to do on a very, very, minor part-time basis what people on the other side of the table do for a living is kind of, it's kind of a brand knife to a gunfight.
I don't think that we would be getting rid of Mrs. Carroll in that, and she, I would say professionally, is our negotiator, or has been in the past. And I do want to make the point that this would just be for the ESP continued negotiations. This is not, we aren't talking about the teachers yet. But I don't have any problems if you want to join us along, Mr. Buscardin, and to come along. So we don't have any sort of a motion right now. So we would need a motion. Go ahead, Ms.
I would offer a motion to appoint Mr. Cerisi, Mr. Buscardin, and Ms. Page to the negotiations subcommittee for ESP.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Not that we're interested.
Dr. Ajay is asking if we're going to include administrators, and what I say is, why don't we do this motion, and then we can decide on what administrators want to put out there too.
You're all more than welcome to do it on your own if you'd like. I'd be happy, as a matter of fact.
All right, seeing there's no further questions, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? All right, so now, Dr. Ajay, do you have a suggestion for what administrators to be on this committee also?
Yes, I would suggest myself and Mrs. King.
Oh, that's absurd.
All right.
I second that.
You win. Dr. Humberg volunteers. She's in.
No, actually, the motion should be the superintendent or his designee and the director of administration or her designees. Because if there's a meeting where one of them is not available, we want to still be able to continue, so.
Right. So I'm looking for a motion for the superintendent and his designee and the administrative Director of Administration. Sorry, I blanked out on your position name, Mary. The Director of Administration or her designee.
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? I see no one is raising their hand to say they won't do this. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? I do want to make sure, just for the purpose of making sure that we have the full negotiations committee, that the understanding is that we would continue with our attorney being president. Am I correct?
Yep.
Okay. And we don't need to take a motion on that?
When you dissolve the negotiating committee, I don't think you dissolve me because we continued.
I just want to make sure that that's clear for everyone and clear for the record also. All right. Dr. Ajay, do you have your hand up?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. Now we now come to item C, an update on the 403B retirement plan.
This is actually just something that I came across that should have been taken care of back in May, that our plan administrator on the 403B plan, now that's the plan that is discretionary, that employees can put money into, there's no match, this is not the state plan whatsoever. This is the other deferred plan that we have. We do need to do some paperwork cleanup, and the options are to allow plan-to-plan transfers to and from the plan or not. I would recommend that we allow that option. It just gives an employee who's coming into this district the opportunity to transfer from another district their funds if they had them in the 403B.
So moved.
Second.
All right, are there any other questions? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right. The Asset Management Commission representative, we actually had an applicant. You will see in your, I believe that he actually applied a little while ago, but the paperwork wasn't complete for some reason. I think it was the sort of thing we were trying to make sure we always contact anybody who turns in the paperwork. Am I correct, Ms.
We just received it from the town clerk's office.
Oh, that's what
why.
it was.
Yep.
I knew that there was something that it was why there was the delay, because it is stamped at the top of July 2nd, 2012, but we only just received it. So he turned it in plenty of time. As soon as we received it, we contacted him. However, it was just that delay. Lorene has stated that she contacted Mr. Heyer, and he is still interested. Right now, we do not have a representative from the school committee. We had received Clifton Seabury's name before, but I think he is a member at large on the committee.
That's correct.
Yes.
That's correct.
So he is not the official school committee rep. He is on the committee. So I'm looking for questions and then a motion to approve Mr. Heyer.
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Mrs. Avanzato.
I'm just going to make a quick note regarding his qualifications, which are very impressive, with his PhD in aerospace engineering sciences. Also, he works at the Naval Undersea Warfare Center in Newport, performing scientific research for the development of new undersea vehicle systems. So I think he can handle our Asset Management Commission. What do you think?
I don't know, maybe a new lesson
I think he's a little bit overqualified, but we'll take him.
Yes, could we say we have, if you worked for the aerospace, could we say that we have a rocket science?
Rocket scientist.
Yeah. All right, so we have a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Great. All right, that brings us down to the Healthcare Task Force. I will let Mr. Welch and Ms. King say anything if you would like about this.
We had discussed this a couple of meetings back, and in further discussions, Mr. Welch and I had decided that we wanted to get this committee going. We were going to start it with a little bit of a smaller committee. At this point, we can certainly invite other people, add people to the committee. And the recommendation was that there would be one representative from the teachers union, one representative from ESP, myself, and a school committee member. And again, we could expand that at any time, but we wanted to at least try to get started, to get some ideas out there, and get the ball rolling on this task force.
Mr. Welch, did you want to add to that?
That's pretty much it. I think, my feeling was in discussions with some of the folks on the teachers union was that this can be a benefit to both sides, because if we figure out a way to lower the cost for the health plan on both the single and the family, that means that the employees would be paying less dollars in their co-share, along with the taxpayers paying less dollars on the taxpayers' side. So in keeping all sides in the loop, employees and administrators, I think it's a project that's worthwhile, even if it doesn't change anything because it will make both sides aware of where everything is. There's a certain reality, I think, that is missed from my perspective on the employees. They look at obviously their contribution share to the premium, but up until recently, we were paying, the taxpayers were paying 96% of the premium for the ESP union, and now the taxpayers are paying 80%. And every time that goes up, that's a big jump. One year we had a 17% increase. Well, 80% of the 17% increase is a lot of tax dollars. So it affects both sides. And by keeping both sides in the committee and the learning process, I think everybody will benefit by it, even if it doesn't turn out to change a thing. I think it's beneficial. And I'd like to see, possibly at some point, the town join in, because I think it's important right across the board, because we're paying those same premiums on the town side as well. So anything that we can do in adjustment of plans or how we go to market that can save dollars, I think is extremely important. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Cerisi.
So, if I'm understanding correctly, at this time you're looking for a motion to approve the configuration of the subcommittee?
Yes, and I think what we had discussed was that we would not appoint a school committee member or ask for a volunteer until after December.
Okay.
Right, what we would do is when we have our, I guess it's our our organizational meeting where we all pick our seats of committees and that sort of thing, we would put this on at this time or that time. And the other thing is we would go by the charge that Mr. Welch drew up. I was just looking back here to see if I could find what meeting that was in, and I believe that was our September 11th meeting. The only difference would be that we would go by the number of members, as Ms. King stated, rather than the number that were in the original charge. So that would be what the vote would be upon.
I think that's good.
I'd make a motion to approve that subcommittee at this time.
Second?
All right, is there any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right,
Mrs. Page?
yes.
In light of passing that, could we please make aware of this to both of the unions so that they would be prepared? And I don't know if you want to, but I personally, I would also advise, I would consider advising the town what we're doing, and would they like to join in with a representative, give them the opportunity to say yes or no.
I'll take care of that.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to policies. The last time we met, we actually put off CCA because we had some tinkering to do with the organizational chart. So now before you, you see the new and improved revised organizational chart. Are there any questions?
Make a motion to approve.
Second?
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. All right, that brings us to citizens' comments. Right now, I cannot see any names on the sheet for signups.
Nope, it's blank.
Is there anybody who's going to speak on citizens' comments? Please state your name for the
Hi,
record.
Nancy Ciccone. I work at Hamilton Elementary School. I'm a paraprofessional there. Couple of things. Dr. O'Jay, I like your idea of the all-day kindergarten. I actually spent a little bit of my lunchtime today talking with one of the resource teachers about the difference in all-day K students versus part-time K students and the level of success that they have had with the all-day K. So I think that's a fabulous idea. Mr. Cerisi, I also like your comments about the in-house programs for special ed, students who we typically send out. My concern with that is, just briefly, I remember when we had the behavior program, the ALP program at Hamilton several years ago, and the number of paraprofessionals it took to staff that program and how undertrained we felt when that moved to us. And I guess my concern is the effort that we would have to go through to move a student if they were not successful in-house to an out-of-district location. And it took a lot of effort just to get that done when we were an ALP program. Just a concern that I have. I also fear that putting students in the old administration building, to me, as someone who's, not quite middle-aged, I remember back to my 5th and 6th grade years where kids who were not typical were in the basement. And I kind of get that connotation when I think of that building. No offense, I know you're housed there, Dr. Auger, but it's not really a warm and pleasant place.
Well, right now they're in the D building, so.
Well, I know I've
which
done
has
some
a basement quality all of its
right.
own.
I've done some PD trainings there, and it was sort of like, really, is this some sort of bunker that we,
Yeah, right.
But anyway, I also wanted to briefly comment to the letter to the editor that was in the paper. Gotta say, it was the talk of the lunchroom that day, and I felt like we had been punched in the face. I understand, and I did send a letter to the editor back. I don't know if it will be published, so I was hoping that I could maybe just read this quickly to you in case it is not published. In a letter to the editor, Thursday, October 18th, 2012, the superintendent of schools and several members of the North Kingstown School Committee claimed that they and the NKESP union were at an impasse and that further animosity toward one another is simply not productive, end quote. If this group believed that their own words, then why did they publish this letter? In reality, Dr. Auger and the school committee's letter propagates misinformation and promotes hostility, which is just not productive. Dr. Auger and the school committee alleged that ESP, quote unquote, engaged in 2 immature and petty stunts to intimidate and harass. First, quote again, an ESP member shone a beam of light into the eyes of school committee members on the stage during the October 9th school committee meeting. During the meeting, Dr. Cerisi asked an audience member if she was aware that she had a light on that was shining in the committee member's eyes. The woman apologized. She turned off the light. Mr. Cerisi thanked her. The meeting continued. This was unintentional as far as an audience viewpoint to me. I don't know. I certainly didn't seem that it was a stunt, and it didn't seem that it was really harassing and intimidating as it was misconstrued in the newspaper. Can I just continue?
Sure,
and then I'll let you.
Yep,
sorry.
absolutely. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Second, the signs that were put up with Dr. Auger's picture and the phrase, honk if you've been fired by Phil. Although those signs are harassing, and I do consider that harassing, and Dr. Auger, you were probably embarrassed, as anyone would be. Without proof, though, that the NKESP put up those signs, your allegations are false. The letter goes on to discuss negotiations between the union and the school committee, and it's difficult to comment on these negotiations since factual information is hard to come by. 20 months ago, the union and school committee negotiation teams agreed to one thing, negotiating ground rules. These rules prevent the union members and the public from knowing what transpires behind the scenes during negotiations. Dr. Auger suggests that after 20 months of negotiating, the full membership deserves to look at it and have their voices heard, and I agree with you. So where can I pick up a copy of it? For 20 months,
from your union leadership.
For 20 months, we've continued to work in good faith, while Dr. Auger and the school committee terminated our custodial co-workers and chose to ignore the arbitrator's decision, leaving negotiations perpetually stalled. Despite the insulting insinuations that we are not behaving professionally, maturely, and realistically, members of the NKESP have always been and will continue to be positive role models committed to the care and education of all North Kingstown students. Thank you for listening. Mr. Cerisi, you wanted a question?
Thank you. I'm just going to think of, I normally don't do this, and we normally are not allowed to do this, but I've just asked.
That's the only reason I'm hesitating, because I would rather have all the citizens' comments, and then we do have some ad hoc committee reports, and if the committee members would like to say something at that time, I think that would be, in following what we traditionally do rather than starting a different precedent. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Tina Billadu. I'm a paraprofessional at Hamilton. I also want to comment on the letter. Like Nancy had said, it did kind of blow us all away, the feeling of that. And most importantly, it had to do with the community looking at us. The comment was made, the community looking at us as, who are we putting our children with? Being positive role models, doing what is right for the students. We have been doing what is right for the students. Excuse me. I know last week there was an article in the paper that mentioned that the ESP union represents the custodians. Custodians was in there. Bus monitors, grounds workers. No mention of paraprofessionals. We are on there on the front line with these kids, and we are doing our job. That's what, that's what it means to us. We go in there, those kids are everything, and I'm still going back to work when last year I was making $762 take-home pay, and now I'm making $584. And that's a big impact, and I know that'll change in January when we go lower and stop paying back for July and August. But it's very important that you understand that, and the ESP union understands that it's give and take. It's give and take between the school committee and the town council. It's give and take between the union and you guys. And that's all we're trying to get down to. That is it. That we just want this over and done with.
So don't we.
I know, and I do
So don't we.
understand that. I do understand that. And when it gets to the point where it's impacting my household, everybody else's household, it gets emotional. And we just want it to end. We don't want it to go now where we understand the teachers are going up for their negotiations. We don't want it to continue. But we also feel attacked by having letters like this put in the paper. It's the attack back and forth that needs to stop. And I implore our union, and I implore you, that we just, I don't know what else to say. We need to meet somewhere, and we need to get this done. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on citizens' comments? All right. That brings us to the end of our meeting. I do know that Dr. Ajay wishes to say something. I know that Mr. Cerisi needs to say, I see some stuff. Now, this is a question I have for the committee. So normally, when we are here meeting, we do not respond when citizens comment. So I'm not saying you can't respond this time, but I just want to know, how do you want to take this at the next meeting when citizens come up and want to comment, and then other school committee members want to comment? That's what I want to address first, and then, okay?
I don't mind speaking to that, and I think at times we need to make some exceptions to the rule. And I think tonight, being that it's a relatively short meeting and we've finished early, we do have a little bit of extra time. We only had a couple of members from the audience that spoke at public comment, and that's left us a few extra minutes and given us an opportunity to comment or respond. And I think on this particular topic, it is important to comment and respond, because I think there's plenty of blame to go around for all parties involved, and I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I think this type of communication will hopefully be productive in clearing up some of that. So I'd ask the chair just for some leniency, and my comments are be very brief, and if that's okay, I'll continue.
How about if we have Dr. Ajay, and then we'll go to the committee members? Is that all right?
I'd like the committee members to start.
All right, then go to Mr. Cerisi, and then,
Sure,
Okay.
I don't mind waiting.
I'm just going to very briefly address some of the specific comments that were made, and then I'll get into a little broader or general area. Specifically with the comments that were made regarding the light. You know, that evening, to keep things very brief and fluent and non-confrontational, I thanked that individual. I gave that individual the benefit of the doubt and said, you know, I don't believe it was malicious. I don't believe it was intentional. But to be perfectly honest with you, that individual was holding the light underneath a piece of paper, shining it between the backs of two chairs, directly on Mrs. Advisano's forehead. To have it directly on somebody's forehead the whole time, that's 15 minutes. That's not a mistake. That wasn't a mistake. When I brought it to that person's attention that they were doing that, rather than saying, oh, I apologize, I'm sorry, that person looked around like I was talking to a third grader in the lunchroom. So that individual was also asked by Dr. Roger, Dr. Roger requested through the union president if that individual could make a simple phone call or send a simple email to Mrs. Advisano and just say, you know what, that was unintentional, or you know what, that was wrong of me, I apologize. You know what the union said? No, we're not apologizing. Okay, well, let me finish, ma'am, okay? So, okay, those are the things where, unfortunately, the school committee and the administration and the union leadership, who gets caught in the middle of all of that? You guys and the students. And I can tell you that firsthand from my own personal experience, because I've been a union member for 23 years, okay? I've never been part of the union leadership, but I've found myself caught between my union leadership and the administration many a times over 23 years. And that's where you guys are right now. And you know what? For you guys that are out there on the front lines in the schools working with my son and other kids, I feel for you. And I'll tell you what, you're being led around and you're being misinformed and you're being used to come and do these demonstrations and all this other good stuff. Okay? You know what? Ask your union membership, ask your union leadership to give you a copy of the last proposal. Take a look at it. Ask them for it. We have no problem providing it to you, and we will after our next meeting with them, which I believe is Monday. But ask them to look at it. Ask to take a vote. If you guys vote no, fine. You go back to the negotiating table and keep working. If you vote yes, then it's done. But you guys at least deserve a look at it. And your own membership has not had that opportunity. Okay? And I really, a lot of you people, friends of mine, neighbors of mine, work with my children. I see every day at Dave's Market or down at the baseball field, okay? I live in this community. This isn't enjoyable to me, okay? And the worst part of all of this is now your own leadership is not even calling the shots anymore. It's the people that are coming out of the NEA office in Cranston, the state NEA. And I know Dr. Roger, when he has an opportunity to talk, is going to elaborate a little bit further on that. Because while he was out at a restaurant this weekend, they decided to show up there and pass out flyers to the patrons of that restaurant. And by the way, the sign didn't say honk if you were fired by Phil. It said honk if you were fired by Phil and added D.O. at the end of Phil. That's what the signs really said, if you really want to know the truth. And if you don't believe it, stop by Dr. Roger's office. He'll show you the signs. They're in his office. That's the kind of stuff that we're subjecting parents and students in this community to. Really?
That's what your dues pay. Does that make it feel good?
Your John Linedecker and your Nancy Franco, they were at Sonoma Grill drinking
Nancy
and
was
eating.
not there.
I'm sorry, not Nancy. John Linedecker, they were at Sonoma Grill eating and drinking with their buddies using the union credit card to buy their drinks and their food. That's your dues. That's what your dues are going towards. Yeah, I know. Unfair labor practice. Let them file away, because at this point, I really don't care, Mrs. Carroll.
I'm going to go to Dr. Roger, and then I see your hand. We said that Dr. Roger would be next.
You know, I appreciate the comments tonight. I just want to clarify a couple of things. You know, the letter that was sent out, I felt very strongly about it then, and I feel even more strongly about it now. The flashlight issue, Mr. Cerisi talked about that. You know, after reflecting on that and talking to members of the committee who saw that going on for a while, It sounds, it seemed like it was something that looked intentional to us. And we asked, I tried to keep this as low-key as possible by calling Sandy, because I knew she was sitting next to the person, and just saying, can we talk this out? It was the last thing in the world I wanted to deal with, was to follow up on a silly issue like that. And unfortunately, that's what we're relegated to at this point. That's the communication we have with the union leadership at this point, dealing with those kinds of issues. The next morning, there are signs with my picture on it, same picture off of our webpage, same picture that is on an NEA link website, Roundhouse Left, with my picture again, same picture, okay? And that Roundhouse Left has plenty of lies about me there with these signs. Put in locations on Anaquatucket and Boston Neck Road so that no matter which way I come to work, I'll see it. And by the way, my kids will see it when they come to the high school. I don't think that's all that professional. And I'm not thinking even that our people necessarily are doing that. I know who's doing that, because this Saturday night, as you know, I play in a band. My band is playing at Sonoma Pub, and John Leidecker shows up with other people that I know are union officials around the state. While I'm playing, he's handing out awful lies, flyers with awful, awful things that I know you would not do. But he's doing it on your behalf. He is the person that's negotiating on your behalf. The night before the first day of school, he was calling the shots. And we asked. And Nancy had to make a clarifying statement to us. No, we're calling the shots, really. We're the ones making the decisions tonight. Really? Because it doesn't sound like that. I have discussions with people in ESP. I know people want to get back to work and just focus on their work. And I know, Tina, you won ESP of the Year. You deserve it. Okay? That's what we should be focusing on in this district. But, on the one hand, you hear, well, we want to negotiate. And the next morning, there's a sign out. And then we call people on the sign and put an article in the paper saying, what's going on? Do you want to negotiate, or do you want to keep playing these games? Oh, no, we want to negotiate. Dr. Roger's, it's overblown. That's what Nancy said in the paper. 2 nights later, there are people at Sonoma Grill. Was that overblown? That person handed a flyer to my wife.
All right.
So, I think, I'm not into telling people how to do their business, but those people are representing you. And if you wouldn't teach our kids about that, and I know you wouldn't, to behave that way, then why are you allowing this guy to represent you? Right. That's a crime.
All right, I'm going to step in here. I know tensions are very high with everyone on this committee about what has been experienced. Before this committee started today, I had 2 grievances that I handed off to Lorene that Marianne has gotten. What I would suggest is that you can still air what you feel, but I think that we should adjourn this meeting, and I think that people should sit here and speak to the folks in the union one-on-one, but I do not think, and I do not advise this group to continue to do this on camera. I do not think this is advisable that we have this in our meeting minutes. I think that we are stepping into a slippery slope where we don't want to go. And I do not think this is advisable that we have any further conversation on camera or in the minutes. So I am looking for a motion to basically adjourn this meeting, and then I'll be more than happy to stay here and talk. But I do not want any more of this to go into the minutes. And so I'm asking for a motion to adjourn.
May I have the opportunity to speak, please?
I'm going to ask Marianne for legal counsel.
I'm going to speak.
Let me just advise you, as your legal counsel, that no good can come of what's going on right now. You know, by tomorrow morning, we will have more unfair labor practices. That's my advice to you.
I'm going to speak, please. If I may continue?
The gavel over to Mr. Cerisi, because I don't feel comfortable in going any further with this meeting.
I just would like members of the union that are listening to know some of the things that they may not be aware of that have been happening. And I also would like to say, I think it's unfortunate that members out there that would not engage in these tactics, and there are many of them in North Kingstown, many, many of you that came to the microphone, I know, have nothing to do with any of this. But you understand, just as it's very upsetting for you because it's impacting you financially in your households, there have been personal attacks. And it's been going on for a while. We said nothing at some of these rallies when people have come to this meeting. Things were being shouted to the stage that you don't even want to know what was being said, that were very inappropriate, unprofessional, actually harassment of members of the committee. Just very briefly, they went to Mr. Cerisi's place of employment and spoke to people that he works with. And now they've gone to Dr. Auger's place of employment where he was playing with his band. They handed out those flyers, had attacks on people's families in them. I mean, just the tactics have been just completely underhanded and personal. I don't think this committee has engaged in that, but at this point, after 3 or 4 times, that letter needed to be we needed to respond to some of these tactics, is my point. I could have called the North Kingstown Police over that flashlight incident. I don't know that it was a flashlight. It could have been a laser, which is what a lot of people said. It could have been a laser pointer, for all I know, which can burn your eyes. But I didn't make a federal case out of it. We just put it in a letter. I just want you to be aware there's many things you don't know, both things that have been done to members of this committee and also offers that were on the table to you, to the custodians that did not involve outsourcing, that I think were very fair. So I don't want to do this from a place of anger. I just want you to understand that it's difficult for us and our families and to have personal attacks against us as well. And you weren't aware of many of the tactics, so you need to be aware of some of the tactics. And I think that's all that I wanted to say. Thank you.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Meeting is adjourned.